We've already submitted our marriage registration with Emily. So, no matter how much you cry and beg, the divorce is final. We are officially married. You kept me waiting for so long because you wouldn't agree to split. Emily, perhaps thinking of the time she was made to wait, glares at me with an unpleasant expression. I've been thinking about how to part ways without hurting you too much. Fortunately, your collapse gave me a good reason. Robin is really kind. But because of that, I had to wait for a long time, which really pisses me off. Both of them are making such selfish claims to me. A divorce from someone who can neither do household chores nor work properly. And I'll be asking for a property division. There's a lot I want to say. But it would be useless to argue with people who brazenly say such outrageous things. With that thought, I decided to accept the divorce. Understood. However, 7 days later, Robin called me, crying. My name is Julia Kirkland. 27 years old. I work at a branch of a real estate company. I got married 2 years ago, and now I live with my husband, Robin. Before that, I lived with my mother. My parents divorced when I was young, but my father paid child support properly. And my mother was independent, so we never struggled financially. I was also doted on by grandparents from both sides. For events like birthdays, as well as entrance ceremonies and graduation ceremonies. Each of them celebrated with me. And it's fair to say that I grew up without lacking for love in any aspect. Now, my mother lives about a 10-minute walk from our house. And we manage to grab lunch or tea together amidst our busy schedules. I also keep in relatively frequent contact with my grandparents. The person I meet the least is my father. However, I don't believe he's cold or neglectful towards me, rather. It seems he's being considerate towards my mother. We do keep in touch, and it almost feels like he's a father on a business trip. Despite having grown up without material wants. The consciousness of being a child from a divorced family lingers somewhere in my heart. And I've always harbored a longing for a family where both parents are together. Perhaps that's why I had such a strong desire not to divorce. As a result, I ended up in a painful marriage. I started dating Robin when he came to the branch I worked at looking for a new place to live. And I was assigned to assist him. His contract for the room he had been living in since his student days was ending. I'm living in a dorm room with no bath and a shared toilet. My salary has gone up a bit, so I'm thinking of moving to a slightly better place. After showing him a considerable number of properties based on such requests, we found ourselves talking about various topics during the moves. Discovering shared interests, which brought us closer. Would you mind if we exchanged accounts? While it's not ideal to exchange personal contact information with a client, I too wanted to talk more, so I ended up giving him my email address. As a result, we started dating and eventually got engaged. The lease renewal for the room you found for me is coming up. So, I was thinking, why not move to a place where we can live together? Could you look for it again? That was Robin's way of proposing. We had a small, intimate wedding ceremony with just close family. I don't have many relatives, and Robin's parents aren't very close with their relatives. So it was decided that would be fine. The attendees were my mother and my in-laws, as well as my grandparents from my mother's side and Robin's grandparents. After exchanging vows in a chapel, we had a meal in a small restaurant, a small wedding ceremony. But I was filled with happiness. My father and paternal grandparents congratulated me and celebrated the marriage when I went to inform them, despite not attending the wedding out of consideration for my mother. It wasn't because they were neglecting me. My father and I maintain a good relationship with that level of distance. And so, our married life began in a 2-bedroom newly built rental apartment. Of course, it was a property managed by our company, which I searched for with great enthusiasm. It wasn't very large, but it was spacious enough for a newlywed couple to start their life together. The location was convenient for commuting to both of our jobs. And I thought I found quite a nice apartment. You really are a pro, finding such a nice place. Just like my first room, Julia, you're really suited to be a real estate agent. Robin was satisfied with the room, and I felt fulfilled in both my work and personal life. Our newlywed life started off happy. We agreed to share household chores. But due to Robin's job in sales often keeping him out late, and me usually being able to come home by the regular time, I ended up handling most of the household duties. When Robin came home late at night, he was usually drunk. I had to drink because of socializing. It's tough because I'm not that good with alcohol. I understand. Just don't overdo it, okay? I know, sorry for making you worry. Robin would say this and hug me tightly. It was truly a time befitting a newlywed couple. However, about half a year later, Robin's attitude began to change. You might think half a year is still within the honeymoon phase. But as if the period of intense closeness had ended, he flipped his attitude and began to belittle my job. You're back already? Must be nice, working as a receptionist at a real estate office. Do you ever have to do overtime? Our store has night hours for clients who can only come in the evening. So there's hardly any overtime after daytime shifts. Sounds pretty easy. Why don't you work at night too? Since it's an easy job, a little more time won't make much difference, right? I don't want to be the only one you rely on for income. Let me clarify that both of us work. We share household expenses. And there's no truth to the notion that I'm relying solely on Robin's income. How many hours did you work today? Just moving around a bit when someone comes into the store, and then getting paid for it. Real estate must really be an easy job. However, Robin's remarks only worsened over time. It's not like that. I keep in touch with clients, negotiate with landlords, handle repair requests from residents, and do many other things. Enough. No matter what you say, it all comes down to a passive job, doesn't it? You're not trying to do anything new or innovative, are you? Robin kept demeaning my work. Why would you say such awful things? You weren't like this before. Huh, awful? Do you think I'm saying something awful? I think I'm just stating the obvious. Robin glared at me as he continued. The problem is you're asking me to do housework even though our jobs are completely different. So that's it, I realized. Robin probably felt guilty for dumping all the household chores on me, which led to his attitude. Sorry, I've just been so busy with work, I inevitably end up putting more on you, Julia. At first, he would apologize, looking sorry. But now he acts as if it's natural for me to do everything, even leaving his laundry scattered on the floor. Could you at least put it in the laundry basket? Stop nagging. If you see it on the floor, just pick it up and put it in the basket yourself. It's something you can do instead of complaining to me. The situation became utterly hopeless. Although it was unpleasant, I silently took on the household chores, acknowledging that Robin was busier and I had more free time. I believed that once his work settled down, he would return to his old self. However, there was no sign of Robin changing back to the man I loved before we were married. By silently accepting the household chores, Robin grew increasingly arrogant. You're not doing much of a job anyway, right? So, keep the house clean. Even though Robin said I had more free time, I was still working. There were places I couldn't reach no matter how hard I tried. We had moved into a new apartment when we got married, and I tried my best to maintain its newness. But Robin would nitpick, looking for places I hadn't cleaned and accusing me of being lazy. If you can't handle the housework, why don't you just quit your job? Then, he started saying things like that. Frankly, it would be difficult to afford our current apartment on Robin's salary alone. When I explained this with numbers, Robin became furious. So, you finally say it. You think my salary is low, that you're looking down on me. I couldn't understand what he was accusing me of. Wait, I've never thought that, not even once. Liar. After we got married and you found out about each other's salaries, you started nagging me to do housework. That's because you thought my salary was too low. I had misunderstood. I thought Robin felt guilty about not being able to do housework because he was busy. But his true feelings were different. After getting married, it turned out my salary was higher than Robin's. This fact hurt Robin's pride, making him feel as if he was being made to do housework because he was inferior. Of course, my salary is low. You must feel so good about yourself, earning more than me. It's not that much more, I think. The hours worked are different, aren't they? I see. I came to another understanding. Robin felt inferior not just in terms of total salary, but also in terms of hourly wage. That's why he was so fixated on the fact that I hardly ever had to do overtime. I never thought of you that way. I've never looked down on you. But if I've made you feel uncomfortable, I'm sorry. Though unaware, I might have inadvertently hurt Robin. With that thought, I apologized to him. As long as you understand. Listen, in a marriage, the husband is superior. If you can understand that, then make sure you take better care of the house. Although I found it unreasonable, I was relieved that Robin seemed a bit calmer after my words. Being a child of divorced parents, I had a strong desire not to go through the same ordeal. I didn't want to have conflicts with Robin. I had expressed this sentiment to him, so he should understand my feelings. I thought I just needed to be a little more patient. Arguing would only hurt us both and worsen our relationship. If I could just make small concessions, we could live together without conflict and maintain a good relationship. I hoped this would bring back a peaceful life. Robin would return to the kind person he was before our marriage. That was what I believed, but it was a naive thought. Thinking he had subdued me, Robin became even more arrogant, behaving like a king and treating me like a servant. Just do as I say. Don't even think about having your own opinion. Yes, I understand. People who don't have the initiative should just silently listen to those who do. And always speak to me with respect. Before I knew it, I couldn't argue back at all. I had heard that a frog wouldn't notice being slowly boiled if the water's temperature was raised gradually. I was like that frog, unaware of being pushed to my limits until I suddenly collapsed at work one day and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. 2 weeks into my hospitalization, Robin visited me, but as soon as he entered the room, he smirked and said, "You're such a useless woman." A woman I had never seen before stood next to him. "I'm sorry. I'll try to get back home as soon as possible. Please forgive me." "No need to try. Take all the time you need to recover." "Really?" I was surprised by his unexpected words, thinking Robin would surely blame me. "Yeah, really. Because you and I have no relation anymore." "What do you mean?" "You're so slow to catch on. It means I'm divorcing you and marrying this woman, Emily." Robin pulled the woman named Emily close, and she leaned into him happily. Emily was a much older woman than Robin, with heavy makeup. "Actually, we're already divorced. I haven't signed any divorce papers. You're useless and now sick. You have no value to me anymore. So, I've already filed the divorce papers. It seems he forged my signature and filed the divorce papers. That can't be legal. But it worked. Robin and the woman exchanged smug looks. And who is this person? My new wife. Nice to meet you, I'm Emily, Robin's wife. Well, the new wife. Emily said this with a triumphant air. We've already submitted our marriage registration with Emily. So, no matter how much you cry and beg, the divorce is final. We are officially married. You wouldn't agree to break up, making me wait for so long. Emily, perhaps thinking of the time she was made to wait, glares at me with an unpleasant expression. Waited? How many days are we talking about here? Days? It's not about the number of days, it's been a year. So, they've been involved for a year. You probably don't understand how precious 1 year is for a woman in her 30s. How old are you? I might look young, but I'm 38 years old. Emily says this proudly, her heavy makeup almost cracking into a smile. She looks her age, but mentioning that might cause trouble, so I decide to keep quiet. I was kind, so I was thinking about how to break up without hurting you too much. But then you collapsed, which gave me a good reason. Robin is really kind. But because of that, I had to wait for a long time, and it really pissed me off. They both make such selfish claims to me. Divorce from someone who can neither do household chores nor work. And I'll be asking for a property division. There's a lot I want to say. But it would be useless to argue with people who brazenly say such outrageous things. With that thought, I decided to accept the divorce. Understood. After I said that, the two of them left looking satisfied. It was like a storm. I muttered to myself and pulled out my smartphone from under the blanket. I had recorded the entire conversation. I can use this to expose Robin's wrongdoing. When I was hospitalized, it seems I was in a dangerous state in many ways. Following Robin's orders had made me unable to think for myself. I was always careful not to make Robin unhappy, did household chores to satisfy him, and worked to continue our life. I collapsed due to overwork. I hadn't been eating or resting, just continuously trying to please Robin, which apparently led to my sudden collapse. I remember being told by a colleague that I seemed to have lost weight. But I think I replied that I was dieting. I answered reflexively because my colleague looked worried. If Robin knew someone was concerned about me, he would be displeased. That's why I gave such an answer. What started as a small concession gradually became a surrender of my ground to Robin, pushing me to the edge of a cliff. I had no idea I was in such a state. I was really surprised. I thought you were living happily, my mother said, tears welling up in her eyes, when she rushed to the hospital. I still don't understand why I collapsed. That was the truth. I just wanted to live happily with Robin. But why did it come to this, even though I was just enduring a little? And Robin? Didn't he say anything when he heard you collapsed? He was such a kind person, what happened? I would like to know that myself. It's hard to explain everything to my mother in a few words. For now, just rest. We'll think about what to do next later. I ended up staying in the hospital for a while. Thanks to the rest, both physically and mentally, the fog in my mind cleared. Why did I listen to Robin? Gradually, I was able to think for myself again, realizing it would be difficult to continue my marriage with Robin. That's when Robin and Emily came to visit me in the hospital. Robin seemed to think he could still manipulate me, but by that time, I had fully awakened. However, I decided to pretend I was still under his control to see how things would unfold. Quietly, from under the blanket, I turned on the recording function of my smartphone. Now, my smartphone contains evidence that Robin forged the divorce papers. I was sure that constituted some kind of crime. Upon checking, it turns out to be forgery of private documents, punishable by imprisonment for not less than 3 months and not more than 5 years. Often, sentences are described as X years of imprisonment or a fine of Y amount. But I read that this crime does not include a fine as a penalty. That means, unless given a suspended sentence, one has to serve time in prison. Somehow, a crime that carries only imprisonment and no option for a fine feels quite serious. So Robin did that to me. There's no need to hold back against such a villain. I made a call to someone from the smartphone I had in my hand. I was discharged from the hospital 5 days after Robin's visit but did not return to the house we lived in. Living in that house for 2 years, the first 6 months were happy. But then Robin gradually began to change, and by the time a year had passed, he had become a tyrant. Probably around the time he met Emily. What I couldn't understand was, if he wanted to divorce me and marry Emily, why did he need to control me like that? What exactly was Robin's goal in doing such things? But now, rather than pondering over these questions, I had something else to do. Now that I've regained my mental and physical health, I've decided to take my revenge. 2 days after I was discharged, or 7 days after Robin and Emily's visit to the hospital, Robin called me as I expected. "Julia, I'm so glad you picked up the phone. Where are you now? Why haven't you come home?" The nerve he had to say something so blatantly. I was speechless with astonishment. "I'm sorry. Who is this? Stop joking around. It's me, your husband, Robin." "I don't have a husband. If Robin filed for divorce and married Emily, then he is Emily's husband. He's not my husband. You've divorced me and remarried Emily, haven't you? Then, you are Emily's husband, and we have nothing to do with each other." "That's okay, I'll divorce Emily. Then we can remarry, so there's nothing to worry about." "No one is worried, I was just stating the facts." "I'm not worried. I have no intention of remarrying you. Please be happy with Emily. You're misunderstanding. I only love you." Robin began to cry over the phone. Did he think that crying would move my heart? I was being threatened. Emily is the daughter of the president of our company. She said she'd fire me if I didn't date her. I was just going along with it, believe me. Robin continued to plead through his tears. Was the forgery of the divorce papers also Emily's order? Yes. She said if I didn't do it, she would make things terrible for you. I had no choice. I intend to sue you for forging private documents. Robin stopped crying and went silent when I mentioned suing him. By the way, it's time to renew the lease for that house. I won't be renewing it. It's a good time for a change, with no house, no marriage, and no love wasted. Wait. I love you, listen to me. Unfortunately, our company will not be able to assist you with finding a new home. Please use another service. Goodbye. I hung up on Robin's cries and blocked his number. Robin hurried to contact me because he had learned the truth. That morning, he must have seen an article in the newspaper or a news segment on TV about my parents. President and spouse of Thompson Homes, remarried. My parents, who had divorced when I was young, remarried. Seeing a photo of me with them, Robin must have realized that I was the daughter of the president of Thompson Homes. My father, or more precisely his ancestors, were large landowners. And Thompson Homes was started based on the real estate they owned. Even now, there are houses and buildings all over the United States owned by our company, and managing them is the business of a Thompson Homes. I work at one of its branches. My parents didn't hate each other when they separated. My mother, who was skilled with her hands, had started making jewelry as a hobby. which became popular and led her to start her own brand. This annoyed my paternal grandmother. Thompson Homes was my grandmother's company, into which my grandfather had married. Together, they had expanded it significantly. My grandmother had wanted my mother to help with the company alongside my father. So, it's perhaps natural that as my mother's brand grew, the relationship between her and my grandmother soured. As a result of various issues, my parents decided to separate. To say that marriage is just between two people doesn't cut it when Thompson Homes is such a large company, and my mother was deeply committed to her brand. They decided to separate to prevent any further strain on family relations from affecting the company's management. My mother took me and left the house, but my grandmother allowed it. Perhaps my grandmother wanted my father to remarry and have another child to be the heir. But despite her encouragement, he never remarried. The same went for my mother. Even after their separation, they continued to care for each other. That's why my mother kept the Thompson surname after the divorce. And I also had the Thompson surname before marrying Robin. Now, unknowingly divorced, I have returned to being a Thompson. Though my grandmother and mother had a strained relationship, my grandmother respected my mother's character and abilities and loved me as her son's child. She was a very fair and open-minded person. But considering the family's inherited wealth and the company, she couldn't accept my mother starting her own company. She wanted the whole family to face the same direction and continue protecting Thompson Homes together. My father, wanting the same, asked if I would work with them, given that I wasn't against the idea. I agreed, under the condition that I would join as an ordinary employee. So, very few people actually know that I am the president's daughter. My grandmother knew but never made a big deal out of it. I perfectly separated my personal life from business. But I secretly heard from my father that my grandmother was pleased I was learning the real estate business. The precarious situation I found myself in was partly due to my parents' divorce, which, upon hearing, made my grandmother reconsider many things. She came to my mother, apologized for being stubborn, and asked her to come back. That's how, after 25 years, my parents decided to remarry. Such an interesting story couldn't be ignored by the media. After my mother visited me in the hospital and told me about their decision, I said I wanted to join the interviews with my grandmother. Naturally, she was delighted to accept. Major newspapers, TV, and magazines came to interview us. And my story was also prominently featured. Naturally, this caught Robin's attention, as I had hoped. As planned, Robin learned that I was the daughter of Thompson Homes president and a wealthy landowner. His frantic, tearful phone call was the result of realizing the magnitude of what he had lost. I sued Robin for forging the divorce papers. Robin's lawyer sought a settlement, but I refused, resulting in Robin being prosecuted and given a suspended sentence. Of course, I also demanded compensation from Emily. And since she knew about the forged divorce papers, I sued her as an accomplice. Emily's lawyer also sought a settlement, but I refused that too, and Emily received a lighter, but still suspended, sentence compared to Robin. Robin and Emily's meeting was at the company's founding party. Emily had fallen for Robin at first sight, despite knowing he was married, and pressured him into a relationship. Robin was initially troubled by Emily's advances due to her being 10 years his senior and not his type. But he couldn't refuse her because she was the president's daughter, and ended up in a deep relationship with her. The president, too, had been troubled by Emily's inability to marry and turned a blind eye. He thought if Robin took her off his hands, a little money would solve any issues with Robin's wife. Robin confessed that initially, his behavior towards me stemmed from guilt over making me do almost all the housework despite his lower income. I wanted to believe that by speaking poorly of Julia, I was doing the right thing. I was happy to be pampered by Julia and was being spoiled. Looking back, I realize how childish I was. He said this while crying. But even if that were true, the fact remains that he deeply hurt me and pushed me to a point where I felt I had lost my heart. Initially, even if it was out of a desire to be spoiled, as Emily came into the picture, he probably thought that if I became ill, he could divorce me. So when I got sick, he hurriedly forged the divorce papers and filed for marriage with Emily. He thought that I, who had been like a puppet following his every word, would accept it without resistance. If Emily's involvement was discovered, the divorce would be his fault. He planned to make it seem like I was to blame for the divorce. At home, Robin treated me like a servant, while with Emily, he bided his time, juggling both relationships and waiting for an opportunity. I never intended to leave Julia, but Emily was so persistent, I couldn't break it off. I truly love only Julia. I was just waiting for Emily to give up. Robin desperately pleaded this to his lawyer, but of course, no one would take him seriously. Emily's father was furious and forced Emily and Robin to divorce. Subsequently, Robin was fired and is now working at a company that barely agreed to hire him, working from early morning till late at night to pay the property division he owed me. Emily's father didn't demand property division from Robin. This was not only because Emily was complicit, but also because he prioritized ensuring Robin could pay me. Honestly, I didn't care about the money, but I wanted them to pay for their crimes, which is why I refused any settlement offers from Emily's father, despite his pleas. Emily's father said he wouldn't let her go free again and begged me to settle things quietly. But after understanding my firm stance, he eventually accepted it. Emily is now under strict family surveillance, starting from scratch to mend her ways. Sometimes, I think that if Emily hadn't fallen for Robin, none of this would have happened. However, considering she pursued Robin despite knowing he was married, her crime is not light. Robin could have clearly refused Emily's advances, being aware of his marital status. But he didn't. Dreaming of marrying the company president's daughter and betraying his wife. That is an unforgivable crime. What happens to them from now on is no longer my concern. As long as they never appear before me again, that's all that matters. After my parents' remarriage, I, as the president's daughter and heir, began studying anew. Although I had learned about real estate as an employee, managing a business is different. Now I must study even more, including company management. My stubborn belief in not wanting to divorce like my parents led to such an ordeal. It was my weakness. If I had been stronger and faced Robin properly, maybe things wouldn't have ended this way. Perhaps we could have remained a happy couple. It pains me to think this because I genuinely loved him. I married him out of true love. To have turned such a person into a criminal weighs heavily on me. There are moments when I feel I'm the one with the greater sin. But my mother and grandmother assured me otherwise. You shouldn't blame yourself. You didn't hurt anyone. What they did was entirely their choice. Your mother is right. If there's any fault, it's mine for not accepting your mother, making you timid. My mother and grandmother, now reconciled and close, comforted me in this way. Blaming myself also means blaming them, which I came to understand. Humans are made to make mistakes. What's important is how we deal with those mistakes. I'll meet someone I can love as much as I did Robin, I don't know. But I'll make sure not to repeat the same mistakes. Refusing to live a life where I don't love anyone again because of one failure. Even if I don't meet such a person, I want to live a life where I can walk straight and proud alone. I'm just starting to take those steps. I've sworn to myself to live a happy life, no matter what.